Okay, yep, here we are. It's 5:30. We're going to get started. So hello and welcome to our June webinar about pride, resiliency, and housing justice for our neighbors who are LGBTQ plus in Clark County. I'm Laura Ellsworth, Strategic Partnerships and Advocacy Manager with Council for the Homeless, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I think we all know that these past few days have been pretty intense with the hot weather and the anticipated end to the moratorium on evictions due to the pandemic that was actually scheduled for tomorrow, June 30th. Wonderfully, last week, the governor did announce a bridge to the end of the eviction moratorium through September 30th now. So that, along with these cooler temperatures, which I can't believe I'm saying 90 plus degrees are cooler temperatures in the forecast, have definitely brought some relief. So I just want to thank everybody who advocated to extend the moratorium. It's not perfect, and more advocacy is needed for it to be the most effective. But for now, it's definitely something. I also want to thank all of the helpers these past few days who opened up shelter, donated money and supplies, brought snacks and water to folks, and everyone who took time to serve our most vulnerable people who don't have shelter or cool air during the heat. I've been excited to host a webinar this month that focuses on pride. We know that members of the LGBTQ plus community are disproportionately impacted by things like the ending of the eviction moratorium. And we know that when LGBTQ plus families and individuals do face eviction, there are often additional barriers to finding stable housing that exists for them than for those who are cisgender and heterosexual. We also know that members of the LGBTQ plus community are resilient. They have faced socioeconomic barriers for centuries, and the challenges that exist in their lives are not new. So a Pride webinar this month is an opportunity to highlight, recognize, and celebrate our community partners who serve our LGBTQ plus neighbors. It's an opportunity to say, we see you, we see who you serve, we see the struggle, and to celebrate our shared humanity, which exists even during our most overwhelming and seemingly insurmountable challenges. Some people tonight may already know this, but Pride started out as a riot, an act of resistance built on love. So those in the queer community recognize that this month is about more than just parties and parades. It's parties and parades with intention. It is an out, open, loud, raucous celebration in honor of people whose lives were taken because of their sexuality. So our webinar tonight will highlight the struggles that LGBTQ youth and adults go through and why so many of them are experiencing homelessness. It's a chance to highlight the challenges that a queer couple has to overcome when trying to find a house to rent, and the programs in our community that exist to support them in those efforts. This is Council for the Homeless saying, we see you, we want to support you no matter what, to our LGBTQ plus neighbors who are experiencing homelessness. I also want to acknowledge the emotional labor of our panelists tonight. So often we rely on the people being marginalized and oppressed to point out those oppressions, discriminations, and real world struggles in the name of educating the people who do not experience that. So please remember that the stories you will be hearing tonight belong to the people who live them, and we thank our panel for sharing them with us. So first, just a bit of housekeeping. The only people that you can see and hear are our hosts and panelists, so relax, you're not on camera if you're attending. We will send out a recording of this webinar and post it on our website within the next week. There's going to be a lot of resources shared tonight, so please know that you can go back and view this to get them again. We'll also send them out in our follow-up email. And also, please help us by providing your feedback after the webinar by taking the short survey that's going to pop up onto your browser. So here's our agenda for tonight. We hope to provide some context for being good neighbors and allies for our LGBTQ community, illustrate the importance of providing trauma-informed care, shed some light on why and how LGBTQ youth experience homelessness at such a higher rate, highlight our partners in providing services for LGBTQ community members, and just have a great conversation with a few of our fantastic partners in this work. And lastly, we'll end our time tonight with a call to action. So efforts to fight discrimination and validate LGBTQ plus identities are directly helpful. Here are some tips for allyship from Sean Johnson, Program Operations Specialist for the Transgender and Gender Non-Binary Health Program at UW Medicine. Number one, validate and don't stereotype. There is no one or right way to be gay, lesbian, trans, non-binary, bisexual, or any other identity under the LGBTQ plus umbrella. Even though stereotypes about queer people are still rampant in society and culture, it's important to remember that real people are not stereotypes. So validate each person's uniqueness and how they want to be seen. At the same time, recognize that their queerness is an important part of their identity, but it doesn't define them. Use someone's chosen name and pronouns. This makes a big difference in their lives and shows respect for their identity. This doesn't just go for the LGBTQ plus adults in your life, but youth as well. Additionally, sharing your own pronouns in your email signature, on your Zoom profile, or when you meet somebody for the first time, it's a great way to establish a space where people can feel comfortable to share their own. And don't minimize someone's trauma. While the LGBTQ plus community is resilient, strong, joyous, and celebratory, people in the community have also been discriminated against for a long time. And if someone confides in you about invalidating or violent experiences they have had, or even just mentions them, accept that what they're saying is true. Just listening and offering your support can make a big difference for that person. Learn to recognize and call out microaggressions. There are many types of microaggressions, and some are directly confrontational, such as repeatedly using a person's former name after being corrected. And some are unintentional, like making assumptions or acting out of misplaced curiosity. Microaggressions that come from a place of curiosity are often an attempt to get to know someone or show interest in their identity, but it could come off as invasive because you don't have a close enough relationship with that person for your curiosity to be comfortable for them. And do your own research. Showing interest in people who are different from you is a good thing, as it is wanting to learn more about different communities. However, often people in underrepresented communities are expected to educate others, and this takes a lot of time and emotional labor. And people who already have to live with discrimination often have to then use their energy to educate people who don't face that same kind of discrimination. So if you're curious about some aspect of LGBTQ plus identity, community, or culture, do your own research. There are countless books, articles, podcasts, documentaries, and even TV shows and movies to turn to. Though admittedly, some of them may rely on stereotypes. So focus on research-backed content from organizations such as the Human Rights Campaign, Gender Justice League, Bisexual Resource Center, GLAAD, and the Trevor Project. And I believe that Shavana posted that in the chat as well. And again, these links will be available in our recording. And lastly, another way we can show up to be an ally for folks is to follow and don't lead. And I think this is really important. You know, wanting to be supportive and show up for people is great, but it's also important to take a step back and listen to what people in the community say are the main issues that they face. Follow their lead, don't speak over them, and recognize what privileges you bring to their spaces. So keeping this allyship in mind, let's talk about trauma-informed care and why it's so critical in the context of helping our neighbors experiencing homelessness to also identify as LGBTQ+. Imagine being a young person just kicked out of the house for coming out to your parents and having to tell a person on the other end of a phone this story of the most hurtful and scary kind of rejection possible in order to find access to housing or emergency shelter or even just basic needs. Imagine being forced to stay in a shelter with people of the opposite gender that you identify with. Or how about feeling like you have to hide who your partner is because your landlord might not approve? Or as annoying as surveys are these days, how would you feel to just simply be told that you should be grateful for what you get and not be able to provide feedback about the challenges you face in finding affordable housing or receiving social services? It's important to recognize that the traumas that the system itself reinforces for people in crisis as well as the traumas that individual interactions with service providers can create for people in need. Incorporating this approach to every aspect of a system and by reorganizing the effects of trauma on individuals, or by recognizing the effects of trauma on individuals being served by an organization, we can better avoid the institutional processes and system practices that are likely to re-traumatize people. The effects of trauma on people include memory and concentration impairment, physical disease, lack of trust and coping skills, difficulty with self-soothing, misbelief about yourself and others, and the inability to distinguish between what is safe and unsafe. One way that I've heard it put is this: instead of asking what's wrong with a person, ask what happened. So why do LGBTQ youth experience homelessness at such a higher rate? As I alluded to earlier, family conflict is the most common cause of all youth homelessness. But for LGBTQ youth in particular, the conflict tends to be over their sexual orientation or gender identity. While rejection is the most frequently cited reason LGBTQ youth experiencing homelessness, it's not the only one. According to service providers, additional reasons include aging out of the foster care system, poverty, and conflict in the home. And often it's not just one thing that causes homelessness, but a combination of many. According to a recent study from Chapin Hall at the University of Chicago, LGBTQ young people are 120% more likely to experience homelessness than non-LGBTQ youth. And as you can see, LGBTQ youth make up only 7% of the population, but 40% of the homeless population. So right off the bat, these young people are presented with an uneven playing field. And often the inequities in providing services come through in the form of not enough data. And we know we can do better at gathering information, and that requires building trust so that people feel comfortable sharing their stories. There's still a huge opportunity to build trust and to truly be a system that people feel comfortable disclosing to. Within the intersectionality of LGBTQ plus youth and homelessness, there's work for our system to do to truly help people navigate the barriers that they face due to their status. So before we hear from our panel today, I do want to highlight some other partners in service to LGBTQ neighbors. First, we have Janus Youth Programs. Beyond providing a safe space where youth can find refuge from the streets, youth coming into the perch have access to the most fundamental level of support to meet their basic needs, including meals, clothing, showers, and laundry. Most importantly, the perch affords youth an environment of respect where they have immediate access to a caring staff who seek to build respectful relationships that will help youth prepare for exiting street life. Once a youth is ready to leave the streets, perch staff work to connect them with transportation, legal identification, healthcare, mental health, and addiction services, education, employment, shelter, and housing resources. And Janus also operates the Oak Bridge facility, which is accessible 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Cascade AIDS Project, or CAP, is the oldest and largest community-based provider of HIV services, housing, education, and advocacy in Oregon and Southwest Washington. Cascade AIDS Project helps people living with HIV/AIDS by securing housing and finding essential medical care. The Southwest Washington offices provide medical case management, wellness case management, service navigation, housing case management, employment services, benefits navigation, and peer support to those living with HIV. And PFLAG Southwest Washington hosts monthly support meetings for friends and family of people who are LGBTQ. Meetings are virtual right now and take place either the second Tuesday of each month for families and allies support groups and the third Tuesday for gender identity support groups. Meetings usually last about 2 hours, and most meetings include an educational session or a guest speaker and a support session. You'll meet parents, siblings, straight people, LGBTQ people, seniors, and young people. Some will be seasoned members and others will be new, and meeting discussions are always confidential. And we have the YWCA. Domestic violence is emotional, verbal, or physical abuse that happens between partners. Abuse may take the form of name calling, put downs, threats, hitting, shaking, isolation, unwanted sexual contact, and more. The abuse usually happens more than once and results in fear of or control by the abuser. The Safe Choice and Safe Choice LGBTQ programs commit to advocate for, educate, and support those affected by domestic violence. They strive to collaborate with community partners to present the most helpful resources, information, and education about domestic violence. All right, so now I'd like to introduce our fantastic guest panel of speakers tonight. Karen Kameroff is an enrolled citizen of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. She uses she, her pronouns. Karen is currently employed with the Cowlitz Indian Tribe as the program coordinator for Pathways to Healing, a program that centers on Indigenous survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, sex trafficking, elder abuse, and stalking. She is also a child abuse specialist at Randall Children's Hospital Emergency Department through CARES Northwest. Karen participates in multiple boards and committees with state, county, and local agencies that include Department of Children, Youth, and Families, Local Indian Child Welfare Advisory Committee, Clark County Volunteer Lawyers Board of Directors, and Clark County Human Trafficking Task Force, just to list a few. Her primary work centers on all the intersections of equity work. Karen is nearing survival of raising 3 young men, with the youngest being nearing the end of adolescence. Good job, Karen. She also loves to engage in conversations with others who are interested in developing bridges or roads to close the multitude of gaps in services. Austin Lee is a sexual health educator, facilitator, and trainer who has been working at the intersections of sexuality, gender, and community-driven work for 16 years. They work at Planned Parenthood Columbia Willamette as the Education and Outreach Coordinator in Clark County and serve as the Gender Affirming Care Lead. Austin is a member of Rainbow Support Clark County, a collective of community members and advocates that seeks to improve LGBTQ+ adults' access to LGBTQ+ affirming resources in our region. Stephen Herndon is a group facilitator and program planner for Triple Point, the LGBTQ+ youth group at Children's Home Society. Previously, he spent 8 years as a volunteer and many years as a youth leader for Triple Point. Stephen provides community outreach and introduces Triple Point and Gender Blender to the local middle schools and high schools, as well as school clubs like Gay Straight Alliances. Stephen also travels to many agencies and schools, providing a presentation called Creating Safe Spaces for LGBTQ+ clients and families to assist community members in understanding LGBTQ community terminology, pronouns, gender identities, sexual orientations, and best practices in working with LGBTQ individuals. And Mike Pond received his associate's degree in Vancouver at Clark College, then went on to Western Washington University, where he earned a degree in communications and sociology. While there, he assisted in the passing of a green energy fee and co-managed a $2.3 million budget as the Associated Students Vice President for Student Life. After returning to Vancouver, where he currently resides, Mike began working on local campaigns to help transform leadership at the City of Vancouver, Clark County, the state legislature, and the 3rd Congressional District. Mike currently works as a marketing specialist for ADCO Commercial Printing and Graphics. And over the last 7 years, Mike has supported several important community initiatives, including affordable housing, local school district bonds and levies, and clean industries at the Port of Vancouver. A 2015 graduate of Leadership Clark County, 2017 nominee for the George C. Marshall Public Leadership Award, and board member for the Queer Youth Resource Center, Mike is one of the most involved community members I know. So with that, my colleague Shavonna McEwen, the Equity and Advocacy Director for Council for the Homeless, will lead a discussion with our panelists tonight. Shavonna?
Awesome. Yay. Thank you, Laura. And thank you again to our panelists. I just want to pause on something that you said, Laura, and I really appreciate you sharing. We've got 4 fantastic panelists here in front of us tonight. And I also want to just give a shout out again to all of those organizations who you named in your introduction. It is just unbelievable to me how supportive our community is and how many agencies we have available. Obviously, we have a lot of work to do, but I'm so excited as somebody who's new to council. I met with all 4 of our panelists, and I think they know that I am all about community. And so being able to be in this conversation with members of our community and talking about our community and how to support our community just really makes me feel super excited and fortunate tonight. So with that, thank you so much. And I'm going to throw a curveball right away. I know that we sent some questions to our panelists, so I apologize a little bit. Laura did a great job telling us a little bit about who you are in the work that you do. And I want to kind of deviate from that just a little bit because I want to ask you who are the folks that you're interacting with? Who are the members of our queer community that you're coming into contact with? Of course, in that response, maybe tell me a little bit more specifically about what you do if you feel like it. But who are these folks that we're so interested in trying to serve? And maybe just for the sake of maybe fairness here, I'm sure this has never happened to you, Austin, where because your name starts with an A, you have to go first. But since I'm throwing curveballs anyway, that's one that maybe you could see coming. So I'll throw it to you first.
Sure, that's great. I have a December birthday, so I'm safe on the other plan that people separate folks by. As folks said, my name is Austin, and I work at Planned Parenthood Columbia Willamette, and I'm our education and outreach coordinator. So in my role, I come in contact with a lot of youth in youth programs and in schools where I teach sex ed and sexual health and talk about relationships and consent. I also talk with a lot of youth serving folks in some of the programs, some of the agencies that were listed and lots of other ones, but also talk with parents of kids of all ages. We do workshops to talk with parents about how to talk to your kids about sexuality, sexual health, and that kind of thing. So I'm interacting with a lot of folks who have queer children, who are queer themselves, and really getting to see that from a wide range of perspectives, from middle schoolers all the way up through adults and elders. And so, yeah, so in that work, that's what really inspired me to join and become a part of the Rainbow Support Group, was because I see that there are lots of great resources like Quirk and Triple Point for young people. But then there's also this point where folks turn 18, and it's very common in the dominant culture here to say, you're 18, you're an adult, go live your life. If you've been 18 years old, you probably remember that you did not have all the wisdom and resources that you may have needed to adult well. And so I really am excited by the mission of Rainbow Support, which is to get those resources, cultivate those resources, advertise those resources for programs that can help support young adults, older adults of all ages, because just because you're 18 or 65 doesn't mean that you don't need support or community or resources. So that's a bit more about me.
That was so well said. Yes, why is it that we think that when we turn 18, all of a sudden there's a light switch that comes on and it's like, okay, now you know how to live your life. And especially for so many queer kids who are maybe not even figuring out who it is that they are, who it is that they want to be, even until maybe their later teens, or maybe not even until later on in their adult life. So thank you so much for that, Austin. I want to kick it to Karen next, if I can.
You certainly can. So I always kind of have this moment where I kind of want to speak before Austin does, because they're so eloquent in the way they talk, and I'm like, the. So they already talked about Rainbow Support Coalition. I just want to add to that one of my handful of jobs that I have, working at Randall Children's Hospital. I do child abuse assessments there, and so there's an interesting intersection there with queer youth. And then I've recently been training to do the youth psychiatric in the ED. So it's just been a really interesting newer journey. I mean, I've worked with adolescents for several years in different capacities, but This one in particular, with the psychiatric, this is where, youth that are either currently experiencing suicidal ideation or have attempted come in. So it's like the first people, first contact, right? And I would say that the more assessments that I'm doing in there, the more that there are youth that I'm seeing that are identifying as non-binary or queer. And you see this relation with like family interaction or like at school with peers and stuff. So it's not the most joyous occasion to be working in that capacity. But I think that one of the things that I'm really very appreciative of is that I get to be very affirming in that position. And so sometimes it has been the first time that these youth have encountered somebody that's like not condemning, shaming, blaming, and labeling and stigma and all that stuff. And so it's been very moving for me. And then in the position I'm at with the Cowlitz tribe, the only thing that I want to just word differently there is that is the word two-spirit. So it's not necessary, it's more of a cultural context when we're looking at Indigenous perspectives. Two-spirit is somebody that is seen as a gift in their community. Oftentimes the ones that the elders wanted near them and would share their wisdom and be there for ceremony to help, because they were seen as somebody that had this other gift that other people didn't have. And so I think working working with tribes and tribal communities, it's so refreshing sometimes, because we don't always encounter that same perspective and stigma that other folks experience out in the rest of America in a lot of ways. And so so we do have two-spirit folks that we do provide services to at Cowlitz Tribe Health and Human Services here in Vancouver.
There's so much of what you described in there, Karen, that just makes me think of, kind of this parallel of you talked about kind of your own journey and in, learning and serving in these new roles and taking on those responsibilities. And it really made me think about the parallels between, the diagnostic criteria and the way that the DSM has, I guess, for lack of a better word, on the spot progressed or maybe developed over the last, several years, and especially the difference in the variation from 4 to 5. And I also think about how you just talk so much about how important it is to just be open, and again, like going back to Laura's introduction, not asking folks what's wrong with you, but who are you? What happened? What's going on? And what do you need? And just how validating and important that validation is. So I definitely heard that the parallel there, and I appreciate you pointing that out. And again, the importance of valuing and validating different experiences, whether it's through the experience of somebody who's two-spirited in their experience with the tribe, or a teenager who is questioning their identity and really doesn't have anywhere else to go. So I really appreciate that. Mike, can I throw it over to you? I know that as a representative for Queer Youth Resource Center, you also have some takes on what kind of youth services we have, and maybe a little bit about who those kids are.
Yes, thank you. Mike Pond, he, him, his. I do want to thank the council for putting this on. And Karen, I am so fascinated by that two-spirit dialogue. I'd love to learn more and hear about that more. But I am a board member for the Queer Youth Resource Center, along with Stephen Herndon, who is our board chair. QUIRC, the Queer Youth Resource Center, it's not a physical location, but we operate under the motto of creating community as our center. So a few years ago, we decided that we needed to create safe spaces for queer youth to come together and be themselves. And so we serve youth from 12 to 24 And a lot of our programming has been, we put on a pretty good pride party. We like to celebrate National Coming Out Day in October, and through the pandemic have kind of transitioned that to some game nights over Zoom with some Jackbox games, and then we've also had a couple of mindful music experiences, and really just trying to create that community with queer youth, and not, you know, letting the pandemic stop us from gathering those folks. And you know, I've been on the board almost 5 years now, and it really was for me about trying to create the resources and experiences that I wish that I had growing up as a deeply closeted Mormon boy. I wish that there was a quirk around that I knew it existed, that I could see other examples of queer people in my life. So that has been kind of my main driving factor to participating with Quirk, and really creating the resources that I think that I would have needed and loved to have as a youth. And it's been such a great experience to attend these parties and events, and just see it happening magically in front of you, queer youth interacting, and just the love and compassion for each other in the room, and just kids being themselves, and not having any kind of barriers that keep them from participating and expressing themselves. And, you know, from young performing drag queens to, you know, just dancing on the dance floor in their rainbow gear, it's been quite the experience. And I look forward to continuing on and serving these youth.
And I recently started following Quirk on Instagram, and I'll say that the Quirk social media game is strong. So those kiddos, they know how to utilize that platform, and it's been super impressive. And I love the intentionality behind creating community where you're at, and just really making it an accessible space for the younger generation. And oh, that just made me sound a lot older than I want to sound. But for the younger generation, having that connection through technology is that's so vital. And I grew up in a rural community where if I had, I mean, the internet was my way out, you know, and so being able to connect with folks either over Zoom or Instagram or Snapchat, or, you know, whatever, it's just so important. So thank you, Mike, for working the.
I wish I could take credit for the Instagram game and Facebook game, but our board member Stephanie is fantastic at our digital marketing. We are so blessed and lucky to have her on our board, and she does a fantastic job. And it really is about meeting kiddos where they're at. I don't think we have a TikTok yet, but you know, you got to stay up and fresh and hip and with it to find the kiddos where they're hanging out.
That's right. That's right. So it sounds like it's also like there's a group of folks who are doing a lot of really impressive work.
We have a really strong board. We are always open and welcoming to new folks that want to support this mission. So there's always room to grow, but we do have a really strong group of committed folks who are committed to making this happen.
Cool. Thank you. Stephen, we saved you last but not least. Can you tell me a little bit about who the folks are that you meet through Triple Point?
Okay, thanks, Shavana and Laura and Council. Thank you for having this important group tonight. My name is Stephen. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm with the Children's Home Society. We're a child and family counseling agency in Vancouver and throughout the state. And my program, Triple Point, that you've heard of, I hope, in the community, is really important. It's been going for about 25 years now. And I began, oh boy, like 13 years ago, I began as a volunteer. And the reason I did that, and there's a common thread running in our stories tonight of perhaps coming out, is I didn't come out until I was 39 years old. I came out as gay, and I was married and had 2 children. And so when I worked through my process, I said that I would like to do something that would help young people maybe not have to go through that process themselves. And so I began as a volunteer to this amazing group called Triple Point. We meet of course, we're virtual right now, but we meet in downtown Vancouver, and in the Bears, not many people talked about it. It's grown and become very, very well used with youth in our community. And another thing I want to share is all the folks on this panel, we have worked many years together, as well as the council. We've sat in meetings years ago together, and our common goal and intention is creating these safe spaces in our community. And so one thing I would really think it's important to share is our community is doing things. And of course, there's so much more work to do. But at the same time, you know, there's a lot of folks in the community that have pulled together, and every day I have people reach out asking if there's something they could do, how could they get involved. And so our community is growing, and working with queer youth is really important. The other thing I've noticed is that more and more families of these youth have come to be with their kids, and you know, Council for the Homeless and the stats of LGBTQ plus youth being kicked out is enormous. And so one thing that we do work with that is we work closely with PFLAG in the community, and that's a support group for the families. So not only are we having amazing services with Quirk and Triple Point for our young people, but PFLAG and other organizations bringing the families together and just hopefully stemming that thing of like parents not knowing their kids or kicking their kids out of fear. It's really important that we cover all of these areas. And so I think that our Vancouver community has come a long way. I know there's a lot of work still to do, but it's going to take all of us. It's going to take all of our support for our community and all communities. And just evenings in our community is pretty amazing. So I hope that my connection wasn't too bad, and I thank you for having me tonight.
Stephen, thank you. I really appreciate the shout out and gratitude for community. And I agree 100%, you know, the phrase "it takes a community to raise a child" is so true. And when we think about the interconnectivity of human beings, and when we bring the, you know, the strength of humanity together, and just how beautiful that is. And I think about what really is pride, and just about the fact that it really is about having an opportunity and a space to love. And you know, what's better than that, right? And I want to turn our attention, you know, not negatively, but constructively, kind of critically, to where are the holes that are lacking? Where is the need for more support, not only for our youth, but for our queer community in general? And I'll just kind of leave that as an open question to whoever wants to go first on that.
I wasn't sure which Austin or myself would jump on that one. So the Rainbow Support Coalition asked that question, and that's essentially how it got formed, because there was a bunch of us that were kind of talking, you know, about doing different different events or things like. Oh, was it about 3 years ago? I feel like, I don't know if it's been that long, but I think that 2020, we just like jumped right over that year. So, but one of the questions that we started to have and discuss was that exact question, was like, what are the gaps? And so we just created a community needs assessment and went for it, and just actually, I know for myself, I was really surprised at how many responses that we got and how rapidly we got them. So, and I'll let Austin talk a little more about that, because I think the data really was more collected by them. But what we did find, the biggest gap that people were identifying wanting more of was around mental health. The only question that we didn't think to ask on that was, are you talking about access to, or like, do you want LGBTQ identified therapists or affirming therapists? Like, that stuff we didn't really get into, or just kind of wanted to know, like, what was it? So we just kind of put together town halls with different therapists, and kind of got into a little bit of that. And then we've had a couple other town halls around the same kind of stuff. So there's still like a lot of work to do. So I'll let Austin take the mic on that one, because they're much more eloquent in speaking about all of that.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, so that was a big community effort to get that community survey out there. So thanks to everyone who helped promote it. And we did get a lot of responses around access to mental health, around health insurance enrollment, around lots of things. And housing, a little over 20% of the people said that housing resources were what they needed. And we gave folks a chance to identify themselves on the survey if they wanted us to reach out to them specifically. A couple folks did, and we gave them those resources. And, from that, we started thinking about, okay, well, what's the best way to get this information out there? Right now, what we're working on is getting a searchable database that will be online with all of the LGBTQ plus affirming resources that we can find for folks. That's going to give some information about what to expect and what those places can offer, that hopefully can, in some ways, mirror a little bit of what Quirk has done with its great website, but really targeted towards more of an adult audience. And so, yeah, so that's one of the ways that we can help step into the gap. And I will also say, working at Planned Parenthood in our clinic, we refer folks to counsel all the time. Of course, we with Rainbow Support would happily refer folks to counsel, because y'all are doing really great work and really working on being as inclusive as possible. And I think one of the barriers is that when we don't have shelter spaces that are affirming of LGBTQ people or safe for them, then it's great if they trust you, and it's great if they give you a call, but do you have the resource to send them to? And so it's really a larger community effort, right? Is that we need to, if we have connections with those spaces, with those organizations, is be asking, what are you doing to make sure that that's safe and accessible for all people in our community?
I think another of our gaps would be our schools. There's some good people, GLSEN, doing work in our schools, but the schools are really hungry for information, working with LGBTQ plus youth. And so just getting within our schools, and like Austin said, just knowing who to do a warm handoff with, which community partner is doing the work. And so those are two areas that I see.
I guess I would echo the mental health services. So much of what I hear in the community, we all could use someone professional to talk to, right? And so that to me goes to funding and the dollars to pay for that, as well as I was kind of thinking about, here in Clark County and Vancouver, we kind of are in this community shadow of the other side of the river. They have so many resources, the Q Center and CAP over there, and even their Pride organization is just so huge that there's some little things that we don't have on this side of the river, and I'm thinking about like LGBTQ owned businesses and how to support those folks during Pride Month and all year round. So there's some good examples of that kind of community across the river, but we just don't have those things on this side of the river. Even things like there's no gay bar in Vancouver. That kind of community space for our older folks, that's how they, you know, interact and meet people. So I think that's why we've tried to work so hard at Cork to kind of create those resources and kind of fill in some of those gaps that other major cities would have.
I will say, don't get me started on how hard it is to find a good lesbian bar. Right? But yeah, no, absolutely. For some folks, the idea of having to go across the river for accessible services is a cinch, right? And when we're thinking about who our neighbors are who are experiencing homelessness or who are facing some of the other barriers to care, the idea of going across a river is almost the same as saying, well, all you got to do is go to New York, no big deal, right? And so, yeah, I again love the intentionality around making around the visibility. What I heard from all four of you was the importance of visibility and again, just acceptance, you know, and recognizing that love is love, right? I mean, we are, you know, recognizing that we all are human beings and we've got some essential needs and that's it. And let's get them met, right? As a community, let's take care of each other. And so I appreciate that. It would not be appropriate to have a pride themed conversation or a conversation around what to do to support our community without asking a few questions about pride. So I want to ask, do any of your organizations have great pride celebrations? I know we heard about Quirk having amazing opportunities for youth, but what about the rest of you folks?
Yeah, I'll just share a little bit with Triple Point. Is we've centered our Pride Month, Happy Pride Month, by the way, around queer history. So we've done some fun things with our kids in group and, you know, we're doing the best we can being virtual without the human contact, but we're still with the youth and they still have a way to connect. So those are some fun things. We've, you know, Quirk, of course, has done some cool things, but our Triple Point group has done some pride, wear your rainbow gear and just, but mainly, you know, centering it around talking about our history is what we've been doing this month.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I was just gonna, you know, Cork does a fabulous pride prom, and to see young queer kids in their get-ups, you know, from super formal to rainbow everything is super touching, brings a tear to my eye every time. But we also participate with Vancouver Pride, and you know, I want to acknowledge their excellent work over the years. You know, last year we were all bummed that couldn't happen. This year is kind of a hybrid situation. On July 10th, they'll be having from 10 to 2, I think, a kind of a virtual filming of the show that usually happens on the gazebo, and that'll be you know, broadcast. And then I believe there's also kind of a scavenger hunt with some local businesses downtown. But I'm not on the Pride board, but I do attend several of their meetings and try to support their good work. And they too are a scrappy and hardworking group of people that could always use, you know, more support and volunteerism, because it is such a service to our community that they provide. You know, Pride in the Park is one of the most happy, friendly, loving, family-friendly days of the year, and hopefully next year it'll become back in full force. But that we can't do anything about that now, but next year.
Well, and I was going to jump in and see if Karen wanted to talk, because Karen and I, along with a bunch of other folks who also do rainbow support, we wear many hats, are helping organize the first annual Battleground Pride, which is a virtual event happening on August 7th, on Saturday, August 7th. And we have more info about that. We will have more info about that on our Rainbow Support Clark County Facebook, if you want to check it out. But that's been a huge thing that we're trying to help support, really, so that, you know, if you live in Battleground, you have some community there, right? And to really honor that pride, that community pride can happen here in your city. And I've also heard folks in La Center, right, gathering for doing that. And so North County is really coming together and trying to create some pride events for their communities, right? Not that they won't go to Portland Pride or right, or the Vancouver Pride, right? But to be able to do it in their community is really meaningful. So.
Karen, can you help me remember what just got acknowledged in Ridgefield?
Oh, the proclamation for Pride Month. I think it took a huge community effort to make that happen. So I don't know if Jessica Cole was on, I feel like was one of the participants earlier, but helped craft a letter to go to the city council for that, as well as the NAACP put in effort. So it wasn't Ridgefield residents alone, and which I think is super awesome when you see people from outside of your small city like there to support and help you out and say this is important and we want it recognized. So if Jessica, if you're on there, shout out.
For sure. And also thank you for bringing up the NAACP, because I think that, it wouldn't be Pride without recognizing the efforts of our queer neighbors of color, right? And especially, obviously, always a shout out to Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera and all of our queens for the work that they did. And also just recognizing that for every situation and every statistic that there is around the resources that are lacking or the disparities that the LGBTQ community experiences, there's obviously compounding factors, right, for our LGBTQ neighbors of color. So lastly, I am about to kick it back to Laura, but I'm a big Brene Brown fan, and she often ends her podcasts with these rapid fire questions. So I was hoping that they would be a surprise, but I think they got mailed out to you all. Since I started with a curveball, I can end with a slider. So here we go, or a changeup. I will ask you to just go briefly to tell me, oh, it is on the list. Tell me your favorite queer icon, please.
The first one that comes to my mind is RuPaul, and that's, I mean, there's nothing I can do about that. Mama Ru.
I will say David Bowie comes to mind because of fashion and music, but Sonia Renee Taylor for her poetry and her books now. Check out Sonia Renee Taylor. She's amazing.
I think mine would be Michelangelo Signorelli is a huge advocate all these years. And also I want to honor all of our youth that have been through, Triple Point and Quirk events. Just watching them grow in love is amazing.
I'm more of a contemporary. I've absolutely fallen in love with Billy Porter. Oh,
yeah.
It would be kind of fun to just go around like for the next several minutes and just name all of our favorite queers, right? Which is, yeah, I mean, that's exciting. And I think all of us could just go on for a long time. I want to echo Stephen. I think that for me, seeing young folks who are so incredibly brave and open about who they love and how they love, and not being confined by any labels and just being who they are, I think is amazing. So, okay, lastly, just super briefly, I will just, do we have time, Laura, for one more question? We do. Okay, one more question, rapid fire. Favorite color on the pride flag?
Red.
Yellow.
Purple.
way too hard. I just can't. But I was really hoping for the favorite Pride memory question because I was set. I was right. Can I just give it to you?
What is it? Let's hear it.
This is, I couldn't do a screen share, But so I foster pit bulls, and so the shelter that I foster through, I ended up adopting that dog. That was Balto, and I took him in the Pride Parade several years ago, and he wore a fabulous blue boa, and just oh, it was so heartwarming to just see all the people who were excited because he had these ears that were like huge, and he was adorable. So, there.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing that with us, Karen. Austin, Mike, Stephen, thank you so much. I really appreciate our conversation tonight. Thank you. And Laura, I'm passing it back to you.
All right. Thank you, guys. Yes, dogs are the best allies, I feel like. Always. Oh. Well, thank you for that powerful discussion, everybody. Let's see, I'm gonna restart my slideshow here. Take us out for the night. Thank you to everyone who's been with us tonight. We appreciate you being here, and yeah, just thank you for that conversation. I'd also like to just call attention to the information on the Queer Youth Resource Center website, and I'll send this out with a recording of the webinar as well later. But this site really contains information about different hotlines and support groups and social media groups that might be helpful for folks. So I just wanted to give that one more shout out as we wrap up tonight, because I just was so impressed and excited when I found it and was really digging into it. So thank you to the Queer Youth Resource Center for putting that together. And, you know, you heard from our panelists tonight. Please, as you go out, follow their lead on what they're saying that people need. Believe them, be an ally, advocate for inclusivity and laws that impact our most vulnerable people. And if you haven't signed up, if you haven't already, please sign up for our e-news and action alerts through Council for the Homeless's website. As always, please share what you've learned, share the data, the facts, dispel myths, and reduce the stigma of homelessness. As we've heard tonight, you know, there are so many reasons for homelessness, and you know, people who are homeless, you know, need to, you know, they've been traumatized, and they deserve our kindness and our compassion. And so that brings me to our last, but definitely not least, call to action: be kind. It really does go such a long way. And I just want to thank everybody for being here. We'll see you in July for our next webinar. Thank you again to our panelists tonight. Thank you to Shavana for facilitating that conversation. And I hope everyone has a lovely evening that is not quite so hot. All right, thanks everybody. Take care.